Michael Byrd is the Capitol Police officer who shot and killed Ashli Babbitt on January 6th. A recent report from Blaze News shed some light into Byrd's checkered past. Back in 2004, he fired his service weapon at fleeing vehicles near his home while his neighbor was in the line of fire. Here to break it down for us is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman. So, Joe, let's start with you. You wrote this piece for theblaze.com, and what can you tell us about this incident, and should Byrd have been removed from his post due to these offenses?
Well, those questions have been asked ever since Ashli Babbitt was shot and killed on January 6th. Questions about Michael Byrd and his carelessness and his history of carelessness with weapons. The subcommittee that put this investigative letter out last week outlined a lot of things that we had not heard yet. We knew about the incident where he left his service weapon on the toilet tank in the Capitol Visitor Center. But the incident where he fired at two vans that were driving away from him and told investigators that he shot at them as they were coming at him, those details were new. So they outlined three incidents in this report, and there are three more case files on now Captain Byrd that have disappeared, and the records are missing. So this is a bit of mystery, even as we're learning a lot more about the man who shot Ashli Babbitt.
I mean, this is unbelievable. Do we have any idea? This is not in my list of questions, but do we have any idea how to get our hands on those missing files? I mean, have they been just wiped from existence, or?
I would be surprised if someone does not have a copy of them somewhere. Mm-hmm. I think as this opens up, I believe the subcommittee is going to allow the Capitol Police to respond or not to their demand for those records and explanation. But both Steve Baker and I have talked to people around who have, at least they're familiar with what is in those. So somebody has seen them, and we're obviously very interested in getting a hold of those records because from what I understand, they make the ones in this story look rather tame.
So can you tell us a little bit about, we're on Ashli Babbitt, Frick and Frack, the unidentified men near Ashli Babbitt when she was shot. We recently put out a very interesting story about that.
Yeah, I had been following these gentlemen for more than a year, and they looked suspicious to me, both for their actions and the fact that they have not been identified. And in fact, there's close to 24 witnesses to that shooting outside of the speaker's lobby who have not been identified. They haven't been arrested. Some of them are on the FBI's most wanted list, but a number of them are not. So these fellows stood feet from where Ashli was shot. And in fact, maybe 60 seconds or so before she was shot, they were within arm's reach. They were in the front row, and they were filming the police officers who at that point were debating whether to abandon their post. So they really, they're important material witnesses at a very least. And they went down the steps to the landing, and that's where they stood when she was shot. But, the very interesting piece of this is that after the shooting, they stayed behind the police lines. They approached, one of the top police officials, the Capitol Police, to present themselves as witnesses, and they were escorted out all the way out to the edge of Capitol property, where they were interviewed by special agents from Capitol Police in an unmarked squad car. And we have questions about what was said during that interview, but also the hours of video that one of these Frack, he shot hours of video. And as far as we know, there's less than 2 minutes of it that are in the possession of Metropolitan Police.
That is unbelievable. Can you or Steve say anything, if you want to, about possible explanations for this or theory? Do we have potential working theories on what led Byrd to shoot?
Well, Joe, I'll
Well,
tell you what. I'll tell you. Let me jump in here, Joe, with you real quick. What led Byrd to shoot is still obviously unknown. There's conspiracy theories that this was a setup. There still are many, other than Frick and Frack, unidentified characters that were in that speaker's lobby area at the time. And then we, of course, have, as you talked about in your story, there was that 27 minutes or so that one of them sat in the car with a Capitol Police officer, and yet they never revealed their identity, and the Capitol Police officer never asked for it. There's so many inexplicable and unfathomable circumstances that took place in that scenario. But at the end of the day, was Michael Byrd complicit in a conspiracy to kill somebody that day, or was he just an out-of-control officer who had a history of violence and firearms problems, as we could say it, or was there something more to it?
Well, he had what he has said. He's only spoken publicly about this once with Lester Holt from NBC. He did not even speak to the internal affairs detectives at Metropolitan Police Department who conducted the shooting investigation. But he said he feared for his life when Ashli, basically, she only got her shoulders out the window and part of her head. But he said he didn't know if it was a male or a female. He couldn't see if there was anything in his or her hands. Really did not have a good enough view to really make a judgment. And he kind of crept out of a hidden position. There's no way anybody in that window could have possibly seen him. And then he fired. He says he gave a warning, but we've listened to the audio inside that hallway, and it was chaos. He could have screamed and nobody would have heard him. So, but he said he feared for his life. Now, Ashli Babbitt was 5'2", maybe about 130 pounds. She certainly didn't present a physical threat, but that was his explanation. And one I'm sure that the Babbitt family's lawyers are going to dig into a lot more.
Well, there's another development in the January 6th case from earlier today. Jack Smith filed a motion to dismiss the J6 charges against Donald Trump before his inauguration. So, Steve, I want to ask you, Smith cited in his precedent, he doesn't want to do this to a sitting president, right, which Donald Trump will once again be. So do you think that this is going to be the end of this, or will they try and bring this back up once he's done with his next term?
Ultimately, he has to have the approval from Judge Chutkan. Now, I've sat in her courtroom during a Trump hearing, and I've seen her attitude. I've seen the fact that she seems singularly focused on driving this thing forward. Now, I can tell you that in my own case, even though my own judge is a personal friend of the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, is that if my prosecutor had come to my judge and said, I want to dismiss this case, I believe that my judge would have done so. Under normal circumstances, that's what will take place. I just have seen and witnessed Chutkan firsthand. I don't know if she'll do that or not. It remains to be seen.
So before we let these guys go, we should get a little taste of what we're going to hear tomorrow. I know both of you have been working on a story coming to us from North Carolina.
Yeah, Joe and I for, 72 hours now have been really working hard on a revelation that has just come to us. Last Monday, I drove through North Carolina. I did all the back roads in the mountainous areas where the disaster zones are, and there was something missing in my perspective, and I never saw a single military troop transport vehicle of any kind during that drive, 150 miles or so through the mountain roads and the disaster zones in western North Carolina. So when I got back to Dallas, I immediately began the inquiries. And what we have discovered is that not only, and this is completely verifiable, not only has the National Guard been withdrawn by the governor in North Carolina, but also what they call the Title X federal forces, active duty forces, have also been withdrawn. And this is, God, I hate using this word, Again, it's inexplicable. We don't understand, considering the level of force deployment in other disasters. While I have a direct quote to me from a FEMA official in North Carolina who told me that this was the worst disaster he has ever witnessed times 10, the largest troop deployment in North Carolina was 3,150 troops. Every one of those others, 15,000 at least.